Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. This is Divine Council Worldview podcast here, and my buddy Rich, and
Greetings.
we are joined today with Jorge Gil. And let me give you a quick intro to Jorge, and then we'll kind of get right into why he's here, because there's a lot of really cool work that he's doing that we want to talk to you guys about. So Jorge is the producer of the popular podcast and radio show I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, hosted by Frank Turek. Jorge demonstrates his commitment to engaging discussions on faith and reason. His latest venture, Rara Biblia, is this biblical theology podcast he produces and hosts, drawing from the scholarly research of the late Dr. Michael Heiser. Currently pursuing further studies at Southern Evangelical Seminary, Jorge balances his professional pursuits with family life in Atlanta, Georgia. His unique blend of theological insight, technical savvy, and multicultural experience makes him a valuable voice in contemporary Christian discourse and the faith-based entrepreneurial scene. As the founder and president of Worldview Media, he helps Christian creators strategize and produce content that focuses on ministry. And more specifically, Jorge is here because he is the producer of the show. So we are in constant contact with Jorge all the time. Whenever he does a lot of good work for us in the background, he helps us with all of our technical issues here. So he's the expert that we lean on. Jorge, welcome to the show, man.
Mel, Rich, it's a pleasure to see you guys again. And this go around, I'm on the interviewee seat. So it feels good. You know, I do a lot of interviews, work a lot with the folks at the Billy Graham Association and Focus on the Family. So I'm usually, on the interviewer seat, and obviously my 9 to 5 is as a speaker and content creator for Cross Examine. So I'm usually the one asking the questions and pushing and, giving the arguments and, bringing up the evidence. But today I was blessed. I'm blessed to be able to be here and be almost like the special guest. Even
you are
though,
the special guest. Mel's in charge here, baby.
Yeah, I'm driving this train. It is weird when you kind of find yourself sitting in the passenger seat. It's like, what do I do here? It feels weird to get in the car and be like, I can look out the window and space out all I want.
Yeah. Because with my ADHD, usually when I'm, either running a live stream or producing a podcast or hosting a podcast, I have to make sure that all the technical stuff is ready and the lights, and then make sure that everything is recording. And here I'm just chilling, man. I'm just cruising today.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. And I'd like to say that, I met both of these guys for the first time at Mike's memorial. I met Mel before the memorial started. Then after Jorge was out there, and I went and talked to Jorge for a few minutes. And then as we all went into the open space where the food was and everyone was talking, we'd meander around a little bit and find ourselves talking in a group again. And then we'd all go meander and we'd find ourselves talking in a group again. And I really wanted to talk to Jorge more and learned that he lived just a couple hours south of me. But it turns out that later that week, the memorial was in Pennsylvania, but later that week, Jorge was going to be in Nashville. And so I asked him if I could come bunk with him for a night and ask him.
I remember. Yeah, and that was so random, man. Yeah.
So 3 days after I meet this guy, I'm like, can I come stay with you in your hotel and let's get to know each other? So technically I've shared a hotel room with both of you guys and Mike Heiser. I don't know what that says about me, but but I appreciate the work of the Lord that he did, at the memorial. We all got to meet people that have turned into, fruitful relationships. And so we're just very grateful for you, Jorge. We're glad to have you on. We know how hard you work. We know how much you've done. And we do know how much Mike meant to you, and we look forward to getting into some of that this evening.
Thank you, bro.
It was interesting because at the memorial, this is the first time that Rich and I got to see each other face to face, and we spent Rich and I spent a lot of time talking. But he goes, "Hey, you see that guy over there? He's the big black beard. You got to go talk to him." He said, "We got to meet him." But you were surrounded by people the entire time, and I was like, it was super late. I think I probably left at 11 o'clock or something.
Yeah, it was late.
It was super late.
I remember I remember I ended up asking Swamidas to take me back to the airport because I went in and out, and I had my backpack full of equipment because I really didn't get to talk to anybody until after the memorial because I was running the live stream. And I was over there in the booth with the guys at the church, and stayed up and did. I mean, we were some of the last ones to leave, and I remember, I was talking to Swamidas, and I already knew him. You know, I had a relationship with him. You know, I got a social media agency that helps people like him and Mike and others to grow and to get their message out there. And Swamidas was one of our clients for a while. And so I knew him, and I said, "Hey man, can you take me to the airport?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll go." But we were some of the last ones leaving there, and that's when I met you, Mel, and Rich, and we just wanted to hang out because our point of connection was Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, I guess with that, like, let's kind of jump into some of these questions. Like, I want people to kind of get to know who you are, where you come from, what your background is. So, kind of tell us, I guess, a little first. How did you find Jesus specifically?
Good question. I have the 4-volume version. I have the kind of like
we'll take the Reader's Digest version.
And I'll give you the
Reader's 1 hour show, buddy.
Reader Digest, and I can point people to a magazine article from Zalvo magazine where they interview me in in the section they call The Great Escape. And you're about the audience about to hear why they call it that. So I'm originally from Costa Rica, Roman Catholic by birth, nominal, never practicing Roman Catholic at all. Just a drug addict from, I think, 12, 13 until I was 28 years old. I was always very good in school, very good with math, very good with tech, very good with video games, but I always had a knack for trying new things and, first weed and then other things. Moved to the States when I was 18, trying to chase the American dream of, I will say, what is it? Sex, money, and rock and roll. But in my case was rap. I was into the whole hip hop scene. I was producing music at the time. So I came over here, built a little kind of home studio, started producing, and my life just spun out of control. When I was 28, I was driving home. It was about 3 a.m. As a friend of mine, one of the R&B artists that I was producing, his dad had just gotten out of jail for robbing a bank. So he pulled about 8 years, and it was his welcome back party. And it was about 3 o'clock. I had to go to work at 8 o'clock the next day. And, I had, a little bit too much to drink. Got in a car, got stopped by a state trooper, blew a .8, took me to the fish tank. I spent the night there. Woke up the next day, and the immigration was, La Migra, ICE was waiting on me. Obviously, I had a criminal record because I had gotten caught with weed about 10 years earlier, man. I mean, you're talking about 10 years before. And, I think it's Numbers 23:32 or 32:23 says your sin will catch up with you. Your sin will always find you out. And that was enough for them to keep me for 9 months. I fought the DUI, another miraculous story where I actually got to become good friends with the state trooper that stopped me and talk to him about the Lord after my conversion. And then for 9 months, I studied. I became a Christian. I bent my knee to the Lord about a month and a week after my incarceration. Was fighting for it's called status readjustment, meaning I can get my green card back. And during that time, the Lord put me. I was born again. 9 months in prison, born again, studying the Word from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. When you were in one of those cells, those pods, you have all the time in the world. So I study. Ended up reading about 70 books. Bible studies, commentaries, and that's where I learned about apologetics. So I don't know Christianity apart from apologetics. I got almost an intensive seminary education in jail. I was within a month of my conversion, I was preaching and teaching, and I was just couldn't stop. I mean, I was reading about 2+ books a week, studying 10, 11 hours a day. I got out and started taking a lot of online courses because I was still going through the readjustment status. And that's where I learned about online education. I got a lot of certificates, and within a year and some change, I met who ended up being my boss and my mentor, Frank Turek. I went to one of his trainings, and now I know, but back then I didn't know. They called me about 2 months later, and they say, "Hey, we want to offer you a job." And I'm like, "Why me?" And now, because I became the executive director for that ministry, crossexamine.org, up until last year, where I was transitioned to full-time content creator or speaker for the ministry. But now we know that we use our trainings to scout for talent. And that's what they offered me the job. I started working as a social media social media director for the ministry. And just the hand of God was upon everything that I was doing. So we blew up. We became one of the biggest apologetics ministries online. Our digital presence just exploded. And it was through that I met Mike, but I will leave that story for later on in the interview. But that was my testimony. And of course, I got out of jail. I was reinstated. And then I went through some marital problems, got divorced. There was some domestic violence, fought for my kids, became a sole custodian of my kids. And then I stayed single for several years until the Lord was gracious enough to send me a wonderful woman, and remarried a few years later. And
we met her. Now, I tried not to be too loud in the backyard.
Yeah.
We met her. She was so sweet.
Yeah. But that's it. I mean, it's a whole lot more details. They can find it. You can go to crossexamined.org with a D at the end, crossexamined with a D at the end.org, and just go to the search bar and search for El Apologista. And that article will come up. It was Terrell Clemens. She's the editor for Salvo magazine. She did a piece on me, and a whole lot more details are there. But the Lord had isolated me. I was just too busy with pornography and coke and weed and music and women to listen to him. And then he put me in a place where I had no other choice but to look up and see that he was holding his hand out,
because you don't want the women that prison offer.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it, man. That's the abridged version of my testimony. And I tell people, your testimony is not the gospel, but it's definitely a push towards it.
It's a powerful message. Like, it's your eyewitness to the power of God and what it is that he has done. And one of the things that I just wanted to mention and throw out there a little bit is, for those of us out there, for me sitting here, there is so much potential in people like Jorge who are in jail. Recently, I've built some relationships in the congregation that I'm a part of, and many of the men go to the prisons around my area and do work. So I've got an invite into doing that. So I'll do that this year. I also have an invite into the local county jail of the county that I live in, that I'll be going into work in, because you'll never know who you're going to find there. I mean, you can find Jorge in there, no problem. I mean, that's where I wanted to go, was in jail. There is so much potential in people that are in these places that if you get an opportunity to do this kind of ministry, I would suggest doing it. Go there and listen and learn. If you're in Knoxville, you can contact me and for an opportunity, because I'm going with a bunch of guys to a few different places. But remember that, because there are incredible people that just have had hard lives, fatherless lives, difficult lives, that end up in this place, and God meets them there. and they do great things. I mean, Jorge he's really just getting started because we're talking like 14 years, right? Is that how long ago it was?
Yeah, so that's was 2012. So yeah, we're looking going on 12 years. Yeah, 12 years. Well, 12 years. It was 2012 when I got released. And actually, I was gonna say something just to piggyback on your comment.
Yeah.
And that is, it was just a good old Southern preacher that walked in there, and it was a Saturday. I remember it was a Saturday. He said, "I cannot come over here tomorrow because I got to go to church." He said, "But," he said, "I'll give you the gospel today." And, he had just old, just not even cowboy boots, just those, they're not pointy. They're like square toe boots. Cause, he was over there, probably off his Kubota, picking up all the mulch.
Yes. It's called
before
the John Wayne boot, the John Wayne tip.
Right. So he had the John Wayne's, he had the low cut, boot jeans on, and what do you call it? The stripe. Yeah, no. Yeah. It's like just
the pearl buttons.
Yeah, and he was there. He was a young guy too, and he says, "Hey, I just want you guys. I mean, I feel compelled to share, Jesus with you." And he did a quick 20-minute sermon, and just gave the gospel at the end, and that was it. I took it and I said, "Hey, Lord, look, the only thing, and in your naivete, when you kind of bargain with God and you say, 'Look, I'll give you my life, but you give me my kids,' right?" And I said, "That's the only thing I want. I don't care if you send me over back to Costa Rica or if you leave me here. That's up to you. But my kids, I want you to give me my kids. I want to be able to be in my kids' lives, because my father was never in my life. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be able to break the cycle." And I heard it. I don't remember who said it, but it says that you have to always be on the lookout for those that the world said they unredeemable. Amen. Those are the ones that God uses, and I see it all the time, man. So it's very true what you say, Rich.
Amen.
I think even Chuck Colson, he went through the whole. He was on Ronald Reagan's staff, Nixon staff. Yeah,
he was part of the Watergate.
That's right. And went to jail and just had a major personal encounter and just completely turned things around. And that guy,
I read several of his books.
That guy was a powerhouse.
He started that's the Colson Center, right? That's a big thing right now. I told you that. I do some things. So I do a lot of things. My ADHD is like a superpower. So I do production, I do content creation, I do speaking. But one of my side hustles is I build professional live streaming studios and recording studios for people. And I did about 6 of them for Focus on the Family. And the Colson Center offices are right in there in the building that is Focus on the Family. And John Stone Street now is the one that seats in the seat of Chuck Colson. I remember reading about Chuck saying that Christianity had to be true because for these 12 men to keep this conspiracy until it take it to their graves was incredible, because the people that he plotted with the Watergate, they broke they sing, within months. And that's one of the things that he says, man, it has to be true, because they weren't keeping a conspiracy or a lie. They were keeping the truth. Right. And they went to their graves, never recanting. So, yeah, it's a powerful story. And people those who have been forgiven a lot, you always have that sense that, hey, you know what? It's all grace, and I got to give it too.
That's so true. So we kind of started touching on it before, but how did you find Mike Heiser's work?
Okay, at this point, I was already doing interviews, traveling, speaking on apologetics, which is the main kind of focus of our ministry at crossexamine.org. I was doing I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist talks in Spanish. And, I work with people like J. Warner Wallace, the cold case homicide detective. And so I was doing some of his cold case Christianity and cold case resurrection talks in Spanish. And I remember, I think it may be 2018. I'm one of those that I go to every single nerdy theological conference and symposium, and since 2015 I've been going almost every year. I mean, I didn't go this year, but almost every year to the EPS, Evangelical Theological Society meeting, Evangelical Philosophical Society meeting, and that's where I met a lot of these scholars. Actually, today, and I told you guys today, I was gonna go to the shooting range with, Dr. Mike Licona, talk resurrection and guns, right? But unfortunately he couldn't. He had, was under the weather, but, I met him in one of these, meetings, this geeky, nerdy meetings. And during one of these meetings, I met a guy who interviewed Mike, but I didn't pay him no mind. But I love pop culture. I love video games. I love all of these, 80s and 90s things. And I found out that this guy had written a book, Bible study on the Stranger Things. And man, I'm like, dude, that's the coolest thing in the world, man. And I mean, mind you, I knew nothing about the Naked Bible podcast. I knew nothing about the unseen realm or supernatural or anything like that. I was going after Mike because of the Stranger Things, that world turned upside down, finding the gospel in the Stranger Things. Now, interestingly enough, and this is the beauty of God's sense of humor, at the same time, Frank Turek, my boss, my mentor, one of my mentors, right? He was actually already lining up Mike to interview him about the unseen realm. But I'm the producer of that podcast. I've been producing that podcast for 10 years. But Frank usually give me the list like that of guests of that month ahead. And then there was Mike. And I had already talked to Mike, and I had created like these videos with the Demogorgon, and he already said that he was going to go on a live stream with me on the Cross Examine channels. And I remember that about 2 weeks before the show, we had already scheduled everything on Facebook and YouTube and everywhere we did simulcast. And I sent this email to Mike, and I said, Mike, send this to your social media team and make sure that they blast it out there across all your platforms. And, in good old Mike fashion, he said, man, it's just me and Drina. You know what I'm saying? I said, we don't even know what we're doing. And I said, oh, no way, man. I said, listen, I said, and that was, I think it was around August, something like that. So I said, look, in November, me and you're going to sit down, and I'm going to help you get your social media right. I said, I'll pay, you pray. And I said, and we'll have a meal, and we'll map out how your social media is going to look in the next year, because this is ETS is around November. But then again, I liked to hang out. I like to organize. I'm like the mastermind of getting people together and having fun, for the glory of God. And I actually had scheduled a bunch of lunch, breakfast, and dinners with a bunch of different scholars. I had Mike Licona. I had, I think, Greg Kokel, Frank Turek. I had Daniel Wallace. A bunch of guys out there that are great scholars. I had invited them for lunch, dinner, and even some outings. And I think there was this in San Diego or something like that. And obviously Mike, was in that list. And during that, I was organizing a bunch of dinners and lunches and breakfasts, meetings, and Greg Kokel had heard about Mike, so I introduced them. I planned a dinner, introduced them and a few other guys, and Mike. I remember with Mike when we got back, I said, Mike, you make sure you call me. called me back and he says, "Hey man, I see how you move, and I think that I will benefit with having someone like you to help me. I don't know what's up with Mike and bearded geeky guys, but Mike said I'll when I get back, when I get back home, I'll call you." He called me. He says, "Hey, let's do something." So I drew up a almost like a plan for his social media, and I told him I will help him even if he didn't have any resources, any funds. I will help him out. But then he signed up with my company, and I make sure that, because my company is almost like passive income for me at this point. I hire a guy who is a CEO. I hire a couple of project managers, and I have about 30 to 45 people doing graphic design and video editing and community management and a bunch of other stuff. Audio production and sound engineering. But at that time, I personally was handling Mike's accounts, right? Because I was very interested and I was invested in getting all this information, the Divine Council Worldview, the Naked Bible Podcast, drmsh.com, all of this stuff. I was super invested in getting this stuff out there.
And this is like around what year is this? So you found him, you said in 2018.
So 2018, this was 2019. Okay. And then we hit it really, really hard when the pandemic hit. So early 2020, I mean, Mike went from posting something every 2 weeks to having content out on his platforms every day.
Yeah. Right.
And I remember when I picked up his YouTube channel, maybe he had 11,000 subs. His Facebook page had, I don't even think he had 10,000 subs. And I remember his Instagram had like 2,000. And it just, I mean, like I said, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I have several teams of people that do this with me and for me. So I knew it was going to be just up from there, and it happened, exploded. I worked with him on the daily basis until his passing. And then he introduced me to the guys at Logos and a bunch of other people. And, I've been able to build my network on the shoulders of Mike. And my passion, obviously, is the Spanish-speaking community. So my goal was always to figure out a way to get that. But more on that.
Yeah. And that was one of the, back in 2019, I went to a conference in Northern California. I had a table for McLeod. This was when Mike was still living in Bellingham. He would move about 4 months after this. And I went to just go try to meet people. There was a couple guys at a church down in Santa Cruz, Dan Campbell, and another pastor down there that I can't remember the name of right now. But I went down there to do that. I actually brought 20 copies of the Spanish Supernatural that I had. Like, I just brought it because maybe something will happen. It's Northern California. You never know. And so I went and was meeting people, and I went to a talk. Sean McDowell, Sean McDowell was talking, and he was talking about Stranger Things, but he came at it from a totally different way. And so when he walked back into the area, I said, "Hey, excuse me, my name is Rich." I was like, "Here's a little book that a scholar wrote that might be different than what yours is." And that's what eventually led those two to meet and things like that. So it's amazing to me how much Stranger Things book actually reached a great deal many people, that normally maybe wouldn't have been into going into the unseen realm immediately, but loved all of that stuff because we all love supernatural stuff. We all have enjoyed 80s and, Marvel and all those things like that. We love that stuff, but it was cool at that conference. And we'll get into this because I think we went through those few questions just about, Mel. But when I was there, I met a young man who was a teacher at a seminary in Southern California, but he was literally on his way the next day to South America. And I told him I have those books. So I was able to give all of those books of Supernatural to him and take it down. And he tried to get Mike. he asked Mike if he would come spend a week at this seminary and teach. And Mike was like, yeah, I'll do that. And then the pandemic hit. But even from there, even the last thing Mike ever did in a conference was go and he spoke in Gilroy, California, at a church of about 1,200 for their August apologetics weekend.
I remember that because he was going to go to the Cross-Examine Instructor Academy. I was going to have him as my special guest. You know, I always get to bring a +1 because I'm one of the instructors now. Curiously, I was a student back in 2014, and you know, now I've been an instructor for the Cross-Examine Instructor Academy for I think the last 6-7 years, and even Sean, me and Sean share the cover of a book. I wrote the introduction and he wrote a foreword for it. It was a book on apologetics, and yeah, it was I forgot what I was saying. I don't know where I was going with this. But what was I saying? I'm sorry, man.
Gilroy Church.
We were talking about the Gilroy,
So
the last thing
Church.
he ever did.
Yeah. So yes. So I remember that because I remember Mike texted me and says, "Man, I don't feel too good. I was in this church and I was throwing up, and I can keep nothing down. And you know, I'm gonna go to WebMD and find out what's wrong with me." I remember that, and then he flew back home. And I said, "Mike, are you going to be able to make it next week?" And I said, "No, I'm going to stay home." But I remember that because, like I said, even though, you know, I've said at the feet of Frank for, geez, man, it's going on, 2014 is 10 years. You know, when, you know, how you guys know how Mike was, he will invest as much time as you needed him on you.
Well, you shared your testimony with Mike, right? Like Mike knew your story from birth to it. I remember because when we sat down to talk at that table, that restaurant in Nashville, and you started sharing your testimony, immediately I could understand why Mike would be drawn to you. Because I remember he mentioned you. He said, "I met this guy who has this media company." He said, "You and him would get along really well." But as you were telling me your testimony about, you know what I mean, the fatherless and all those kinds of things like that, immediately I understood how Mike would just gravitate, you know what I mean, and hold on to that. Because any of us that were fatherless or struggle with fathers, Mike immediately would give us that extra time, you know. And so like, what was his personal impact on you?
Well, I tell you, so outside of the theology, because I think everybody who's listening here, there is no in between. You either love Mike or hate Mike, right? Period. There is no gray areas. There is no middle ground. You're either a Heiserite or you're not. And that's the way it is. And I see it all the time because I get to read every comment and I get to see every response for every live stream and every video and every graphic that we create and the team post across Mike's platforms. And one of the things that I can tell you outside of the theology, it was Mike's way to approach people, Mike's way to love people. You know, his convictions, the way that he was not haughty or like he didn't have that like that prideful demeanor.
He's not pompous,
right?
Which
not
people
pompous, but he knew so much that he was so just confident on his views. Even until today, we've seen the barrage of I will say detractors and people that want to destroy, you know, his work, and his work just stands on his own. It's incredible. And, you know, but he was always open and humble. And at the same time, he just had a heart for the church to the point where he's like, yeah, I'm not going to leave my academic endeavors behind. I'm going to leave the academic world behind. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to focus on the church. I'm going to focus on those who are sitting in the pews. And I'm going to grab all this academic stuff that I read, I devour, and I'm going to bring it down to the middle, the bottom shelf. And I'm going to make it practical for the church because that's where the needs are. He says, I'm tired of seeing academics writing for other 2 or 3 academics in an echo chamber. He said, I want to be able to have the flash drive, remember the seminary and the thumb drive. I want to be able to break through theological education in every possible language. And, Mel and Rich, both of you guys are involved in making this a reality. And he would say, I'm giving away my books, and I look forward one day where I can buy back all the rights to my books and I can give them away, and we don't have to sell them, and we can give away all the courses in every language. And, and that stuff just stayed with me to this day, because now, in his deathbed, I remember the last few, not even months, the last few days, I talked to him and he says, look, man, I'm going to send you an email and I'm going to give you everything that I have produce is yours for you to translate and to republish in Spanish. And obviously, I have to go through some legal way to get some of the rights for some of the books that were published through a publisher, right?
Of course.
But for the most part, for everything that he owned, all the rights, he said you can use it, and let's put it out in Spanish. That's why now you have tons of videos of Mike speaking Spanish with Mike's voice and Mike's laughter and his mannerisms and all of that, because now we're using AI to turn Mike into a native Spanish speaker. His website, the drmsh.com, is in Spanish. We're translating, I think, 2 or 3 articles into Spanish every single week. So from the moment I met Mike to now, you can say that we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to Mike's work now being available in Spanish. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and then on the theological side, I think it goes without saying that it's just rocked my world like it did yours and everybody else, listening to this is one of these things like, I'll never see my Bible the same again. And I'm like, duh, that's exactly what happened to all of us. So that's why I didn't want to focus so much on the theological side of things, because I think we all listening to this podcast have had that experience. Yeah. But on the personal side, having somebody where I have a question and I can pick up the phone and call him or text him, and, me being a content creator, being a student, a seminary student, having access to Mike, I look at him as a friend, but, it was, as a mentor, he's been the most accessible of all my mentors. And, I study under great people, but Mike was the one that it felt like a mentor, but it was this guy that was just it was so approachable that it didn't matter the time of the day. You knew you will text him, and as soon as he was free, he was going to text you back. Yeah. And he was not going to try to shortchange you and say, hey, look, I'm busy. I'll talk to you tomorrow. No. He will, even if he was late, he will get back to you and he will say, hey, what do you need? Or this is what you need.
Yeah, well, it was amazing that many of the people, so I was a part of the congregation that he was an elder at there in Bellingham. And when I first got there, people would tell me, he's so accessible. And I'm like, why aren't you hanging out with him?
That's right.
Was my serious thing. And, one of the things that I remind people about, there is an account on Twitter called Heiserite, Australian bro. Shout out to you, brother. But he asked me, he was like, was Mike as authentic as he seemed to be? And I told him, I said, yes, he absolutely was. Because I said, one of the things that you have to remember is that Mike came out with this thesis, I believe, in 2001. I met him in 2013. This has all been grassroots, from the moment Mike put that out. And he knew that. He knew that he wasn't going to be able to go through these other routes, that it required those of us on the ground and who knew him and who found his work. Because again, you understand, once you see Mike's work and it shows and reveals what it does, you're going to go tell 10 people. Yeah, you're going to go tell 15 people. And that's how it's always been with everybody. But Mike persevered through that, and he didn't care. He took every person that came as valuable and cared for them as they did. He wasn't trying to find like the best disciples or anything like that. You know what I mean? He took who God brought and he loved them. And that was a beautiful thing, beautiful thing that he did.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think one of the bring things a little full circle is before I even knew you, Jorge. I, and I think Rich, you were trying to get him on this like speaking circuit. I remember thinking if we could get the content of Mike's work, if we could marry it to something like the philosophical logic of Greg Koukl, and if we could get like those two guys and just like create a little community of sort of like that, we can bring the logic and then we can bring the academic work behind it to show that these agree. They complement each other very, very well. And so I remember saying, dude, you got to meet Greg. Like you're talking about how accessible it was. I can't remember. I'd finished his book, one of Koukl's books, and was doing some other stuff. And I was like, I got to tell Mike about this guy. And I texted Mike. I said, dude, you got to.
That's what Mike asked.
You got to meet Greg Koukl. And then like about 2 or 3 months later, and again, I didn't know you. He texts me and says, hey man, he says, a buddy of mine is going to introduce me to Greg Koukl. I'm going to have dinner with him tonight. And I was like, dude, that's sweet. And I was just like, this is going to be awesome.
I remember, let me tell you something. I don't want to brag. So that was one of the best dinners ever because, well, there was Frank, when we go to ETS, I produce a lot of podcasts for Cross Examine, right? We do a lot of interviews for the I Don't Have No Faith to Be an Atheist podcast. But I'm the guy who organized everything. Like God has blessed me with a lot of connects, right? So I'm the guy that knows the guy. So, you need to know me, and then before you know, you'll get a text. And by the time you walk into the lounge, there's 20 academics over there hanging out. So I always been one of those. Back in the day, I used to use it for evil. I was the troublemaker, setting up house parties and things like that. Now I set up scholar parties, right? And I remember that dinner. We had a couple of big donors at that table, and we had Frank and Greg. So you have two big ministries there. You have Stand to Reason and you have Cross Examine. And then I walk in with Mike Heiser and the Make Lot ministry. And I remember the dinner bill was shy of $1,000. But it was amazing because it was a great group of people. And you have these titans at this table. And I'm not saying me, like you have Mike, you have Greg Koukl, you have Frank Turek, and these guys are just having these high-end conversations. And I'm like a fly on the wall, just sitting there like grinning from ear to ear. Our boy Diego, Diego also was there at that meeting. That was before he started working for me. So Diego was in he was like a kid in a candy store, being able to hang out and have this opportunity to just listen to these guys go back and forth. So, Mel, this was all providential. Again, when we look back, God is always threading and weaving our lives in a way where, we couldn't have done it on our own. It's so many moving parts. The beautiful thing that he's omniscient. He knows everything. He lives in an eternal now because it's timeless. So it's easy for him to be able to put this together. For us, it's mad complex, but for him, dude, he's got to figure out, and I'm just here for the ride, man.
Yeah, that's just faith right there. Walk in the works that he has prepared for you, because I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out.
And the one thing I realized about Mike is I tried to be really discerning about when I hit him up. Sometimes it's just social. Hey man, what's going on? How are things going?
Yeah.
And we would just and he'd call and we'd be on the phone for 2 hours talking about something. But
that's the thing. He will truly, like, it was not just about what can you do for me.
Yeah, no.
No, this dude wanted to know how is it going. Because I'm gonna tell you something, and I'm not gonna say names, man. And sorry to cut you off, but I want to say something. I know a lot of academics, right? And I know a lot of these guys that are high end. That for some people they look untouchable, like they're sitting at the top of Mount Olympus. Right. And if you look at them in the wrong way, they send, thunder and lightning, the down on you. But when I see people like Frank or Mike, right, or even Greg, what you see is what you get. And yeah, you can talk about all the geeky stuff and all the research and all of that. But when they text you just to see how you're doing, and they are willing to pick up the phone to have a 30-minute conversation, about, I got teenagers, man. I need some help. Now that's when you cross that threshold when you know these guys are the real deal. You know, we can talk about Nephilim and giants, or we can talk about stupid teenagers, right? And that's when you have that whole, like that men of God that is well-rounded. I know some academics that will never do that. They can never turn off that academician in their mind, because that's their identity.
Well,
that's all they are.
I think that, but that's why Mike, like the one guy you're talking about, Rich, that asked the question, was he that real? That's why Mike's mission became not about his academics, but about the people, because he just had a heart. He had a heart for the people, just to understand. He realized, he was like, man, there's a lot of good information that I'm sitting on, and all these people just don't have it. And they need it. Yeah. And so like I was saying, I try to be really studious about when I had an idea, because, you know, I work in an area where we got 1,000 idea fairies, and then they have a whole minion of workers that just try and make that idea come to pass. And sometimes they're bad ideas. They're just a waste of time. And but like this idea kept coming up. Sometimes they would, and this was one of them. And there were a series of things, I guess, kind of occurred, and I was like, okay, I need to do this. And one of them was, like, there was these two guys that were doing street ministry in Israel, and they were showing Israelis Isaiah 53. So anyway, these two guys had a really good approach to how they were presenting the gospel. They were doing a very, very good, logical, but very empathetic approach to the people, you know, on the road, on the street. Just a lot of Israelis. They were really most of them are very, very secular nowadays, but they have some knowledge. They have some understanding of kind of their scripture. But I sensed that they could really use more. And then there was this other organization called One for Israel that I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I did not know that Mike knew Seth Postel, who's over there at One for Israel. But anyway, I text Mike and I'm like, hey, Mike, and just to backtrack, these two kids on the street, I don't think they have any affiliation with One for Israel. It was just kind of like a parallel mission sort of type thing. But I contacted Mike, said, hey, these kids like doing this stuff, it's not kids, they're two dudes in their 20s. I said, they could really use your stuff, and you got a lot of good free stuff, you know, and I think you got some stuff in Hebrew. Like, let's get your stuff over there. In real time, like, I think I'm sitting in bed. In real time, he contacts someone in ministry that he's working with that has people in Israel. And he's telling me, hey, they're contacting their person in Israel. It was late enough in the United States that apparently they were awake already in Israel. The person in Israel is already responding to him saying, yeah, what's up? What do you need? Like, hey, we need to get some stuff to these guys, blah, blah, blah. And it was like this chain of like 4 people. And like, I'm literally only the idea fairy. I'm just telling Mike's contacting his people, who's contacting other people, who are talking to the other people. And then at some point we realize, you know, that it's One for Israel and Seth Postel's there. And he's like, oh yeah, like me and Seth, like we know each other, you know? But the two dudes, completely different. I don't know what's ever happened. I don't know if anything ever got to them, but it was just neat that he took it personally. And he was like, no, like, we're going to do this. Like, it's like, that's his mission. He's like, my mission is to get good information out to people in the street, do good teaching for them. I don't care if I'm making a dime for it. I just want them to get it.
So that's the thing. So I wanted to say that. So that's the difference. I know other people that I remember I was talking to a guy, you know, and then again, you know, even though I'm a seminary student and I'm going for a couple of degrees, not just one, on top of doing, you know, being a husband, a father, entrepreneur, and a speaker. So I'm only taking a few classes at a time, but I've been doing all of these. I've traveled the world, spoken, you know, many different continents, done all of these with a high school diploma. And when I'm in the presence of some of these academics, first thing that they want to know, just to see if it's worth their time, is what degree and what's your PhD in, and what is your area of research. And if you don't have one, you're like, okay, they completely lose interest, right? As if that's what gives you worth. You know what I mean? But when you have somebody like Mike, that so everybody, you're an imager, so therefore you have worth, right? Yeah. That right there makes all the difference. And he's involved, like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna stay up. Of course, I can delegate this to somebody else. I can sit in my, ivory tower and just send my minions to do all of this, because I don't want to get my, I don't want to get dirt in my and under my fingernails, right? Or I can go over there and be the one digging, right? And that's what Mike did.
Yeah, I was going to say that, if me and Mike had certain agreements and rules to our fellowship that we came up with, in the first 6 to 8 months. And one of those was, we help anyone that God's puts in our way. Whatever we can do for them, it doesn't matter who they are, what their status is or anything. Anybody that comes, we are going to do what we can for them. And just like I shared at that memorial, I saw this homeless mother out on the street, and I was like, it really bothers me to see homeless women out there. Like the men I can tolerate, but when I see women out, it really bugs me. So I go and try to talk to them, and it turns out this mother, her husband had died maybe like 4 weeks before, heart attack at 37, just dead, left her with 2 kids, was out in the street. And I was like, okay, so I befriended her. I went to Mike and I said, hey, I need money for groceries. So he gave me about $400. I went and took her back, bought her all the groceries, got her packed, had her kids come over to my house for an evening and things like that. And that's where she told me, she was talking. She said, I had to pawn my wedding ring. She had to pawn her wedding ring to get money. And if she didn't get it at a pawn, and the next week it was gone. That's all it was. And it was $1,000. So I immediately said, all right. So I went to Mike and I said, hey, listen, I know that this is $1,000 for a ring, but if we can get this for her, it'll matter for her. It'll mean something to her. And I got a picture of her with that ring, man. Mike immediately wrote the check, for her. And that's one of many times that we did stuff like that. If you brought to him a need like that, he was going to answer.
So that's the way Mike personally impacted me. He changed the way I did ministry, right? He changed the way, he showed me what it meant to be a cheerful giver. He showed me in a practical way, brought to life what it is better to give than to receive, right? And with just his way of going about. And I remember the guy who was his called community manager, or his social media manager, pretty much, is a guy from Chile, right? And he now he's actually overseas studying, doing a master's degree, a continuation of Mike's work, which is pretty awesome, But he has a degree in astronomy. And he knew Mike. Listen, and Mel, this ties to exactly what you talk about, how God weaves all these connections. So this guy is a university professor. He's teaching astronomy. He's doing some stuff with the university down there, and he's I think they're using a grant from NASA to do all of these, or something like that. He had some sort of project that was keeping him employed. Money runs out. He don't know what he's gonna do. We met through Facebook, and he because I don't know, maybe something related to Mike's group, maybe one of the groups, and I asked him, I say, hey, I see he's posting that he's not gonna have a job within like 2 months, so I reached out in a DM and I said, hey, do you speak English? Yeah. Do you do this? Yeah. Do you do that? So I said, hey, I actually am looking for somebody to help me be the manager for this whole, because I remember I was heavily involved in running Mike's stuff. And when I tell him who it was, right, and he's like, dude, it's my dream. He says, and then, fast forward 3 years, and I remember that last ETS that Mike couldn't go, Mike paid for him to fly from Chile to the United States and stay with us for a whole week so he could attend ETS.
Yeah.
Never met the guy, But look, let's think about this. This guy has been following Mike's work for like 6 years before I even met him, before I even know Mike exists. One day he posts something. I reach out to him. He becomes Mike's social media manager. So he gets to talk to Mike every day, right? This guy's his dream was to do that. And now Mike is gone, but Mike was able to gift him the experience of going to ETS, and this guy actually went and got a scholarship to go overseas to now get a master's degree or a PhD, following building on Mike's work, like something like a Muramali. Muramali built on Mike's work. Now this guy is building on Mike's work. I mean, isn't that amazing? And he's still involved in running Mike's social media. So that is the impact that Mike has on all of us. It's almost like that thread that runs through all of our lives now because of Mike. And obviously this is God, but it is almost like you just have to put yourself out there and do the work, and the Lord will connect the dots. And this is something I feel the need to say in a lot of our episodes, because we're not trying to deify Mike. We're not trying to create some new denomination. We jokingly say Heiserites, but it's like we're not. It's kind of a joke. It's just like we like the dude, and there's a whole lot, like we're sitting here telling stories about him. But like Rich told me that story about him buying back the wedding ring of that woman from pawn, and that story just shames me. I'm going to admit, fellas, I don't know that I would do that. I'm almost sure that I wouldn't, knowing who she is, not knowing what her background is. And maybe she's just made a whole string of bad decisions. And if I get this money and go buy this ring back for her and give it to her, it's going to end up at pawn the next day. That's what came to my mind, bro. That's exactly what came to my mind.
That's a little bit how cynic, like what a cynic I am in some things. And so, I hope for the audience, they realize I'm just trying to keep it real, But Mike would do that stuff, and it just shames me, because hopefully people understand the impact of that. That is some crazy empathy for mankind.
Yeah.
I mean, that is literally putting your money where your mouth is.
He had it clear when he came to, the intrinsic value of human beings, the whole concept of being an imager, and he say it over and over in his lectures and his writings when he says, we can say that the image of God is, a set of communicable attributes, but it's more than that, right? It is the fact that we have a status, and it has nothing to do with, our ability to have free will, or our ability to have an intellect, or our ability to have, abstract thinking, or to have to be the only moral a moral animal, right? He says it's more than that, and he had that clear, and he had that that vision to see people the way God sees them, and I think that you were very justified in saying, hey, it's not like that we're deifying Mike. No. The same way that no man was supposed to deify, let's say, King David, even though, the hand of God was upon him, and he was able to do all these amazing feats. He was always a man after God's own heart. And I think that Mike was that. Mike was a man after God's own heart. And he lived that way.
I think every now and then, like a rare person will come around. I think number one, there's a lot of people with PhDs, and I respect the academic discipline and the time commitment that it takes to get a PhD. I truly do. I truly do. But there's a different level of individual. Like, there are different qualities within the academic realm of PhD, the different qualities of PhD, and Mike is one of those. And sometimes I've talked to Rich of like, what was his work schedule like? because that guy was just a production machine.
The machine, bro.
Just like
every
a
30
robot,
minutes.
A robot.
Every 30 minutes of his day.
Yeah, and I have no idea. Like, I can do that too. I can set up my schedule, and I try and do it, but I am not remotely as productive as that man was in the time he was.
ADHD,
and it was like
man,
it was like God just like gave him a unique set of attributes and just a disposition to do this stuff, and then a drive to do it. And it's like whatever like he was finding in the word and the scriptures, it just scratched that itch in the biggest way. And it just gave him even more drive, and he was disciplined in it, you know? And
well, he would also schedule his day. So his schedule was in my phone for about 4 years. So I would understand. And so he would schedule his day, remember, every 30 minutes, but he would schedule it so that things would work into one another. So that if he had to work on like 4 different topics, he would make sure that when he thought about this one, it would work into this one and this one.
Right, it will trickle down.
One. Yeah, just brilliant, man. Just brilliant. I was man, I'm going to go out and talk to some homeless person for the next hour. We'll see ya. We'll see ya.
Okay. So I know I'm not in the driver's seat, but okay, we just finished the question. How has Mike personally impacted me? And
now
we went along on that one because we just have so much to say. And I think that question, that answer, initially almost kind of prompted you guys to share your experience, because I think we all feel compelled to do that. All of us that actually were blessed to be able to have time with Mike.
And I think like I like having our schedule, and we definitely want to get to question number 5, because that's really the point of this whole show, really. But I like to give room for the Holy Spirit to work in some of these instances.
Amen.
In the sense that there are probably some people out in the audience that needed to hear something that we said.
Amen.
Something that was mentioned spoke specifically to someone that's out there, and only you know what to do with that.
That's right.
I have no idea.
But we can get to the final question here. Which is, Jorge, what are you doing with Heiser's work now? Where can people find it? And so on and so forth.
All right. So this is the $1 million question. And honestly, I'm going to start with the coolest thing in the world. And that is that I think by now, and I know, you still can go to miglot.org and download all the translations for free in EPUB and Mobi and PDF and in Word doc format, right, of all the books that have been translated. I know that Rich, you've been foundational. Actually, that was your bread and butter, right, to get all of that stuff done and coordinated and all of that. But I think because the Lord is propping me up to have my own social media platforms where I reach millions of people in Latin America, I think that just this year alone, I will say within the last, I will say 7 months, maybe less, maybe 6. Let's be conservative and say 6 to 8 months. We've probably given out over 10,000 copies of the Supernatural book in digital format and Why Does God Want? And I can actually go online and look how many downloads, because what I do is, because I live with one foot in theology, philosophy, and apologetics, and the other foot on digital marketing, production equipment, and technology. What we do is we have created these autoresponders when people interact with my content. And I use, the apologetics value of the DCW and the Unseen Realm. I mean, it's incredible. So I use that all the time when I'm answering questions or when I'm dealing with difficult, philosophical and theological topics. So because I reference it so much, people can go to my social media platforms, whether it be Cross-Examining in Spanish or Yo Soy Jorge Gil, in Instagram or YouTube or, Twitter or X, or TikTok. They can get access to these books. People ask me, hey, where did you learn that? And just type this word here and you'll get a link and you'll download it. I can go and look, man, but I guarantee you it's over 10,000. We've done some live streams. I've done some live streams. I remember I've done a live stream on, the reclaiming of the nations. I've done some live streams, obviously, in Genesis 6, live streams on the 3 rebellions. I've done a lot of talks online on channels. I remember one of the first channels that invited me to go and do an unpacking of the Unseen Realm documentary. What they did is they subtitled the whole thing in Spanish, and then they brought me in a special guest, and they will pause and ask me questions about it. And I will pull up my Logos Bible software layout, the one that I used to do all my research on DCW, and they will, I'll unpack different points. Dude, this dude had 1.3 million subs on YouTube alone, and the same amount of subs on Facebook. And I'm over there, the guest. And when we finish, the dude sent me a message on WhatsApp, and he says, usually when I have a guest, my viewer count goes down. I never go over 1,000. So we had like 3,500 consecutive viewers. He says, and that video has over 200,000 views right now, and I was like, what? Yeah. So, I mean, it's just amazing the way that this stuff is spreading.
Yeah. Well, they're hungry for it all over the world.
Look,
all
and they invited me. He invited me back. We did it all over again with the Aliens and Demons documentary. I had another guy who I remember by that time he had like 25,000 subs, but his audience was so engaged. 10% of them were live while we were doing the show. We're talking about the Unseen Realm. That's 2,500 people live on a 25,000 sub account. That is unheard of, man. I mean, and I know the numbers, right? Like I said, I have run social media accounts from people that have 2,000 subs and social media accounts from people that have 700,000 subs. So I know the numbers. So that's insanity. The engagement, the amount of interest, the amount of people that have now come out with dedicated accounts to expose, the DCW worldview, to teach and to share all of this stuff with other people. The amount of young people that are interested in maybe learning academically, digging deeper on all this stuff. So we're doing that a lot. I create content around DCW and the Unseen Realm and all the material that Mike put out. Again, I am blessed to be able to say that I sat at Mike's feet and learned. So for the apologetic side is exciting because, again, it is very useful. For the biblical theology side also. It's one of the things. So right now I'm working through cross-examine, and all of this is through cross-examine. Cross-examine. If somebody were to ask me, I will say Worldview Media is my side hustle. Cross-examine is my 9 to 5. So my 40 hours a week are dedicated to cross-examine, and whatever is left, Worldview Media, I delegate it to other people. So through cross-examine, we have 3 different initiatives. And one of them is a podcast. I have a biblical theology podcast that is based on Mike's content. It's called Rara Biblia, which translates into Strange Bible. But the interesting thing is, I'm a guy who I own a esports franchise. That's, for those who don't know what that is. It's a video game franchise where we actually teach kids how to leverage their video game skills, just like a football player or a baseball player. You drop your kid off and we train him in Fortnite and Valorant and Apex for 2 hours, send him home with homework. He has to practice, come back on Saturday for a scrimmage. So I'm into this world, right? And one of the things that I learned is for the next generation, Gen Alpha and Gen C, if we want to capture their minds, they're used to this dopamine hit, that overload of information. So in order for them to stay focused, because they can be focused, but you got to keep feeding them that, right? Because they need to get that dopamine hit. I figure, how can I create a piece of theological material, right? A something that can educate them while at the same time deliver what they need so they can be focused. And I came across this concept of edutainment, which is education and entertainment, just like Call of Duty. Call of Duty is almost like recruitainment, right? Oh, the army is so good. Let me go be a Marine, right? And these kids are playing that and they don't know that they're making the army and the Navy and the, and the Marines look cool, right? They want to be able to have access to all of that tech and all that. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? So in the same vein, I said, can I do something like that? So I decided, because in my background is a sound engineer. So, I'm a producer. And I said, I'm going to do something that is heavily elaborated when it comes to the sound design. And sound design is, when you sit in a movie theater, you listen you watch a movie, all the sounds is called sound design. All the layers of all the sound effects and the way that the voices sound and the mood, backtracks and all of that. And I said, I'm going to create a podcast that is going to include all of these things. So you guys know Alan, because Alan helped us, mix this, do all the sound engineering for the DCW podcast, right? So I grabbed all the essentials of the DCW and started creating these podcast episodes, about 35 to 45 minutes, but they are almost like a dramatized. Have you guys heard about the dramatized Bible, right? Yeah. It's almost like an episode of the dramatized Bible, but because I'm able to use all the tools that I have here, for example, I do all the voices, right? If let's say that a demon is speaking, right, and it's like,
I will go and I will be a lion spirit in his mind,
right? So I'm able to use voice mods and all of these other things during the production, because that's what I do for a living. So I started doing that. So I created almost like it's an experience, right? So it takes me just the mixing and the editing takes me about 20 hours per episode. And then Alan does all the video editing. And so what we did is we look what Ruben did with Mike's documentaries, right? And we try to replicate it in our own branding. So now every single podcast episode is almost like a mini documentary that follows the same visual line that Mike created with Ruben, right? The guy who did the stuff with Faith Life, right? And every audio podcast, it's almost like a story. Right. And you hear Satan talking in the council, and you hear when we're talking about the flood, and you hear it's even in the video when the water video effect, the effect of the water gets to my mouth gets muffled and sounds like it's incredible. Right. So what we're doing is we're grabbing these heavy, thick and complex concepts and we're making them entertaining. And literally, I think right now we only have like 6 or 7 episodes because they're so difficult to create. Yeah. And we have a perfect streak of what do you call it when you grade a podcast, when you review? We have, I think, over 100 5-star reviews on the podcast, and I get messages every single day. I listen to every episode 5 times, 10 times. When is the next one coming out? And the most incredible thing about it is over 50% of those who are reaching out to us are under 25.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. That, bro, is mission accomplished. Mm-hmm. These kids are really eating it up because it's edutainment. It entertains them. It keeps them there. And what I'm doing is giving them exactly right, like the same thread that Mike used to unpack. Like, what you remember when you will listen to the Naked Bible podcast, and Mike will always say, well, if you don't know this, go back to the 3 lectures that I have that will lay the groundwork for all of these. If you haven't read my book. So what I did is I grabbed those lectures and then I reworked them into these interactive episodes. And that's what we're doing. So we have Rara Biblia. We have,
and that's where people can find those?
So all they have to do is go to cross-examining in Spanish. So you go to es.crossexamined, that's with a D at the end, .org, or they can just go to Yo Soy Jorge Gil. And I think that's .com. I think that's a little more difficult, but you can find me. You can find us on YouTube too. Cross-examine in Spanish. You just put cross-examine in Spanish or cross-examine in Español, and all of our videos are up there.
And what can people find on El Mundo Invisible?
El Mundo Invisible is the drmsh.com in Spanish. So one of the things that I asked Mike, I said, Mike, look, I'm not going to charge you guys a penny. All I need for you is a yes. If you tell me, you send me an email so I can have a paper trail of you telling me, grab whatever you want out of the drmsh.com and then republish it into Spanish. You have my permission. You have my blessing. He pretty much said that not only about the drmsh.com, but about everything. But what I did was, because I don't make a living off of Worldview Media. So Worldview Media exists to make sure that I help creators get their message out there, right? The message of the gospel out there in a more effective way. And then everybody that works for me, because we discriminate at Worldview Media, we only hire committed Christians, right? So to give them a job overseas, they all contractors, right? Because some of these people, that's the only income that they have. So I don't get a big, like, I don't have to take a salary out of that. So what I do is I grab the profit, because, obviously, I'm very affordable on the creator side, and on the creative side, meaning all the people that work for me, I pay them above their, I will say, country average, right, for a video editor or graphic designer, because I want them to be blessed. So the profit margin, whatever we have, I grab it and I use it to push forward these projects. So with the money that we make through Worldview Media, now we're maintaining El Mundo Invisible, and I'm able to pay people to translate weekly new articles, maintain the website, and also not only that, but also we're going to be working on trying to like you guys know, we have all this content that we're putting out of Mike in Spanish, and obviously that's through that's through the same deal that we had with Mike before he passed away. But we're doing a whole lot more stuff to be able to get people to lay eyes on Mike's content.
Let me ask you a question, kind of heading in a similar but different direction. So the whole reason you're doing Rara Biblia, is, to obviously feed the Latin market. And we were talking about this before we even started recording. We've talked about this before. I think when we were kind of went and visited you about a year ago at your place, how, like, the Latin culture, they're very, very, it's heavily Catholic. They're very heavily steeped in a lot of superstition, a lot of superstitious practices that probably, to me, here's the thing, I didn't grow up Catholic. I didn't grow up in that environment. To me, they seem like there's kind of like a pagan connection somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's like they have this, I'm going to use the same phrase again. They have this like supernatural itch that they need to scratch. And I think they feel like the biblical narrative hasn't been doing that for them, because they understand there is a supernatural element to the world, and they're not getting it from the Bible, but they're doing these pagan practices. And in some way, maybe it's paying off for them. But are you seeing with what you're doing that people are coming back to you and saying, dude, this answers so many more questions, so much more relevantly than these other things? Like, I now understand kind of why we were doing these other things, but we were doing it for the wrong purposes and to the wrong purpose, to the wrong end, the wrong deity, maybe. What do you see in that realm? Okay,
so that is it's almost like a 3-layered response to that. And great question, Mel. I will say Yes. So we don't have to sell the supernatural to the older generation, right? In Latin America, that's a something that it is settled. You know, they know that there's an immaterial supernatural realm. The younger generation, they do need to be evangelized and to be moved away from a materialistic, atheistic kind of framework worldview. But this helps out a lot. But what I've noticed is, for example, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the question is, you know, we see the proliferation of a more charismatic approach in Latin America, right? And why? Because you have that blend of the spiritual that was already there, and then you kind of add the layer of the either the Catholic persuasion or the evangelical Protestant approach, and then you end up with charismatic kind of flavor of Christianity, because these supernatural things are present, right? Also, a lot of the loose ends that Mike was connecting, and they connected for us, are very present and alive in the minds of most of these people. So when they come across this, so for example, number one thing. So I'm part of a movement called the Legendarios movement. Now, this movement comes out of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, mega church in Central America. People criticize this church, especially its leader. He is one of the biggest word of faith, name it and claim it, Joel Osteen like, you know, preachers in Central America. Millions and millions of people attend his church yearly. Super wealthy. And then one of the guys who was brought up in this church started this movement to get biblical manhood back into the church. Now the guy walks away from the church in good terms, moves to Florida. And again, these guys are super charismatic, moves to Florida and start doing this 4-day completely unplugged in the wood challenges for men, right? And through the 4 days, you're disoriented. It's almost like Hell Week type thing, but Christianized, right? And he starts to add biblical teaching into these things to change men's lives. So one of the things that I go through the process through the thing with my son, but just for my own benefit, right? I wasn't thinking anything of it. Well, they know who I am and they call me back because you can only get in if you go through the challenge. If you don't go through the challenge, you know, you're not going to get in because it's almost like a brotherhood. At this point, there's about 60, 70 men that had gone through that all across the world. They have one in Japan. They have like 5 in Brazil. They have like 20 here in the States. They have one in each Latin American country. Long story short, they called me and they said, hey, we want you to be one of our speakers for the World Summit. And we want you to talk to our leaders. And I'm like, okay, what's the topic? And he says, you remember the other day when you were telling me, we were in Long Beach because the guy was one of the speakers at a tour I did for the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association about 3 years ago. We were in Long Beach. We were at a lounge and we were talking and I explained to him the whole DCW, you know, once you have time to talk to somebody about that, you won't shut up. And he says, well, if you remember, you told me the story of Naaman. And I'm like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And he says, well, you know, we as a movement, we want to reconquer the nations for Christ. And he says, so we want you to speak to all of our leaders about cosmic geography. Bro, that's the one thing that is blowing people's minds across Latin America. That one thing, the disinheritance of the nations at the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11, and then the re-inheritance of the nations
Pentecost.
at Pentecost,
Mhm.
right? That right there,
Yeah.
like everybody's like mind blown. But not only that, obviously the 3 rebellions, everybody's like, wow, the way that they realize, that all of these things that they see on the news make sense
Mhm.
because they realize that there are other entities that are guiding, those physical evil players on the ground, right? So they start to put all of these things together. And actually, I can take you to that live stream that I did, the first live stream that I did when I kind of broke down the Unseen Realm documentary. It has thousands of comments. And these are comments of people saying, you open up a new world for me. I was about to walk away from my faith and now I cannot stop studying my Bible. I started reading the Bible again and it's a completely different experience.
Mhm.
I've been a Christian for 25 years and this is the first time I've ever heard this. Comments like, I downloaded the Supernatural book. I downloaded the Why Does God Want book in Spanish, and now we're using this as our, Sunday school materials at church.
Mhm.
Like that's what we're seeing, and there's no hit or miss thing. This is always bullseye.
Mm.
Of course, you're always gonna get the 2 or 3 guys that is gonna say, he's preaching polytheism or he's wrong, or they'd immediately write it off. But the 99.9% of the comments there, you will see it. Everybody's like, I did do the homework and I went and took screenshots. I think there were like 25 comments of people saying, this is the 3rd time I watched this and I had to put it, usually because of my ADHD, I listen to videos in like 1.5x or 2x. Right? Because I need that constant stimulation. These people said I had to slow this down to 0.5x, right? 0.5x because it's so profound. And I look at that and I'm like, none of that stuff. Now I know how Mike felt when he says, man, none of this stuff is me. None of this stuff is new. I'm just connecting the dots. I keep telling people none of this stuff is mine. I owe it all to Mike. But also Mike owe it all to all these other scholars. They have really done the work before him. And all he did was and when I said all he did, I'm not trying to diminish,
Mike would say it many times that he was a synthesizer. That
right. So
the dirty little secret is that Mike never had an original thought in his life.
Right, exactly.
Correct.
So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a complete, there is a guy on TikTok. He does daily live streams breaking down the DCW. I guarantee you this kid is not even 20 years old yet. Mm. And he has a way more understanding than 99% of the people out there. Mm. And he's grinding every day on TikTok. Awesome.
And there's so much of this actually going on everywhere. In the past decade, the explosion of people being able to get their own information, either from Logos or YouTube or websites or any of these things, has completely transformed the world. It is the revolution, the Reformation and things that have come, because you're finding people in their 20s that are further than most people had ever been in their 40s.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's crazy. Like I said, a lot of these guys are early, and these guys are.
I can't imagine knowing this at like 20 years old, like where I would be today. Like, because every time I open my Bible or every time I sit through a sermon, there's like they touch on something, and I remember kind of leaning back and I'm like, man, and the pastor usually has no clue, like the DCW type stuff. I'm like, dude, if this pastor really understood some of the implications of the things that are going on behind the scenes in this verse right here, I was like, he would blow the minds of the congregation. Like they would just be in awe. But like to your point, I loved the story. The story of Naaman is probably one of my favorite ones because it was just like dirt. Like, why? It was just, for me, it was like one of the strangest verses in almost all the Bible. The guy's a general. He's a top general for the Assyrian army, and he wants dirt. But then when he broke down the whole, rebellion at Babel, the division of the nations at Babel, the division of the tongues at Babel, and then you go forward to Pentecost and you talk about the unconfusion of the tongues and the reclaiming of the nations. It's just like, and then someday, like I heard Mike say this, but then someone else just said it to me like about a week ago. They're like, you know what? If there's no other gods, how come the first commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart? Like you shall have no other gods before me. It's like,
before me, yeah.
Why would he say that if there were none others? Yeah. It's just like, it'd be a foregone conclusion. Like, I don't have to mention that because it's not even a thing, And
I remember when Mike actually gave that sermon, remember he's wearing the purple shirt. I was there in the front row when he gave that sermon and he was talking about Naaman. You would find it, and he got done, and I was like, "Bro, that is so amazing." He's like, "Why?" I was like, "Because it's you, number one, and you're up here rocking it." But that video, when it went out on the platform for the congregation he was speaking in, usually their videos get like 20 views. This thing had like 10,000.
Well, let me say another thing that is making waves in the Spanish speaking world is the whole idea of being sacred space. So. Again, I have gotten audios through WhatsApp because we have WhatsApp communities, Telegram communities, and we have Signal communities. And for people here in the States, they don't use those apps. But in Latin America, those apps are as big as Facebook, as big as Instagram. So we have WhatsApp communities, we have Telegram communities. And I get audios, right? Because I'm part of these communities. I'm the lead. This is a cross-examine Telegram community or cross-examine WhatsApp community, and I get audios all the time of people crying, breaking down, saying, "Dude, when you spoke about being sacred space and about evangelism as almost like we're through evangelism, what we're doing is the prime real estate is the souls of man, and we're over there
like spiritual warfare.
Yeah, spiritual warfare. We're reconquering. It's not only the land, but also those who step in the land, because we're imagers, right? We're sacred space now, right? And people just break down crying and saying, "Hey, look, I don't think I understood not what I am, but whose I am." Right? Now I see myself in a completely different light. I thought I was a failure, and now I know that I'm gonna be judging angels. Right, I'm gonna be, and
that
talking about these messengers. Yeah,
that identity that work brings.
Now I'm going to be co-ruler with Christ. Right. Now I'm going to be, passing judgments on these supernatural beings that throughout my whole life try to make me miserable and try to keep me away from the truth. I even had a guy who was a Jehovah's Witness. This dude was like 40 years old. His dad raised him Jehovah's Witness. I think his mom died when he was young. And he called me and he said, "Hey, I just switched teams." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Yeah, I just got baptized." He said, and then it was a guy on Instagram. And then 2 weeks later, he called me. Well, he sent me a voice recording through Instagram crying, say, "I just baptized my dad."
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Because we understood, through a video, man, right? Like through a video, we understood the gospel, and they went. Imagine you going from Jehovah's Witness, from a JW, to understanding the DCW.
Yeah.
Dude, it is. Yeah, man. And these guys, and it was just so easy to them. Why? Because whatever they were hearing corresponded to reality. Mm-hmm. And they knew it.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, we still have a whole lot more work to do.
Yeah.
For example, one of the things that Mike wanted me to do before he passed away was to get the Awakening School of Theology in Spanish. We did, I think, the Unseen Realm 101 and Unseen Realm 102. We put it out there, but because it was not it was so expensive for us to do it and sell it, we just waited, and now it's going to be sent back to Awakening because they're going into a donation model.
Different model. Yeah.
So now we're going to be able to give it away for free.
Amen.
So even though we put in all the hard work to get it in Spanish, I'm like, I take that loss every day, all day, every day.
And that's actually something we should really mention to the audience. Like if I think they should be aware through the other guys they're talking about, but the Awakening School of Theology is like a great resource. And they did have it like where they were taking, you had to sign up and pay and stuff. And now it's just donation. Right. But they're really hoping.
I've turned so many people onto the free one now that it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like getting a seminary education. It's just.
It is getting a seminary education because now they're connected with Redemption Seminary, which Mike helped got started. And then now you can go to either Redemption, right, and get a master's degree directly based on the DCW, or you can take free classes at Awakening and then just transfer to Redemption Seminary
and get your credit.
Awesome. It is Mike's dream is coming true,
well, and that's this is cool. Like this is cool for the Western world. This is cool for everyone that's like internet connected and stuff like that. But what I think is awesome is like there's a lot of pastors and missionaries in different countries that just don't have the opportunity to go to seminary, don't even have the opportunity to go to college, but they've been called. Like, here in the West, we think that, if you've been called to ministry, you're going to have to go to college, you're going to have to go to seminary, you're going to have to do those other things. That was never a requirement. Like none of his disciples had those educations. Luke arguably was, a very educated individual, but wasn't even a disciple. He was like a follower of Paul. But, so people aren't called, to go to college and get seminary degrees. But if we can give you the good information, like that's the key is the good teaching. And if we can get this stuff out, I mean, I dream of the day where like this is in like Pakistani languages and Afghani languages and, Farsi and, in Korean. Like it's just going to be amazing. And it's free, it's free for these people that like, they just want to be taught. They just want to be taught, and they just need someone to make the connection into the language that they're.
And this is how much of this. When we had a friend, hopefully he'll join us someday on this program, but his name is Mustafa. He originally was born in Iraq. He's an Iraqi who helped, the United States military, but he came over here. He was a Muslim. One of my friends, evangelized him, converted him. We became great friends, but he came to me and Mike years ago and said, he's like, look, here's all that I have in Arabic. And he was like the Purpose Driven Life, A.W. Tozer, and like one other book. So he took it upon himself and he translated. But you could see that like, since there's, we've gotten Bibles into these languages, but they need those other resources to help them understand the context, because nobody just gets the context of the Bible by just reading it. I mean, you can pick up a lot. The Holy Spirit is amazing, but everyone is taught by someone. So we are so grateful here for all of those things, the works of Awakening, the works of everything that you're doing there, the work of Drina and everyone at the DRMSH Foundation. And we're just so thankful for you, Jorge. We appreciate the time that we've had with you, the relationship we have, and we look forward to coming back to you again. But, all of us putting in this work for 10 years, because the world's going to be absolutely transformed in 10 years. Yeah. I don't care how wicked or who does this or that. God's work is absolutely going throughout the world, transforming people and changing their lives and giving them the identity and purpose that they should have, and going out there and reclaiming the nations. So thank you, Jorge, for doing all this,
thanks, man.
We really love you.
It.
We appreciate you. We look forward to, many times of fellowship with you.
Bros, you guys are amazing. Do a great job. I think, again, this was orchestrated by God. I'm just the tiny cog in the machine. You, Mel, Rich, and Ron and Mike Chu. This is a top tier team. Like I said, I'm just in the middle doing the mixes and putting it out there for the people. But I also have my work cut out for me in the area of the Spanish speaking world, getting the stuff out there on top of all the other apologetic stuff that I do. And as the Lord gave me that opening to be able to also help Drina, with some of the ministry decisions. And even though I'm not on the board, she trusts me and she believes in me, and she knew how much Mike trusted me with things like, the growth of the platforms and, website design and things like that. Even if it's just an opinion. I told Mike, before I talked to Scott Lindsay all the time from Logos, we promised Mike, we said, hey, Mike, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that, your family stays well fed and your ministry stays growing. So until the Lord calls me home and I make my quantum leap into the unseen realm, man, I'm telling you, I'm going to be hitting that DCW out there hard, man.
Awesome.
Man.
Yeah, you can't help but do it.
Thank you, bro. We're going to be there with you.
All right. Good chat. Thanks, man.